over the years, I've tried to figure out what can I do to glorify God. You know, how do you worship God? How do you live for Him? You know, I've always thought it was always about preaching and telling people about who He is. You know, telling people the gospel and stuff like that. But that's not all that He wants us to do. You glorify God. What I've learned as I've matured in my relationship with Him is you glorify God by obeying Him. You glorify Him by the way that you conduct yourself. Whenever you obey Him and you meditate on His word, people are going to be able to see that in you. They're going to be able to see that light. Whenever the Spirit of God is not quenched in you and it's fully empowered, people are going to be able to see something in you. And that in return is going to give you an opportunity to tell them what it is that they see in you. All right. Now, Yeshua, if you look at the way that He carried Himself, Yeshua, who the world calls Jesus, you look at the way that He carried Himself, He didn't care about the things that we care about, right? He actually taught us what it means to be humble. A lot of people think that they're humble, but we have no idea what it means to be humble, all right? Yeshua, He really taught us how to be humble. And with that being said, I want to share a few passages in the Word today about what it means to be great, right? So when we think about greatness, we think about, what the world considers great. If you look at some of the conquerors in history, Alexander the Great, that's what society thinks is great. People who conquered nations and colonized countries and stuff. This is what is considered great in the world, right? But Yeshua taught us what greatness really is. So He's talking to the disciples right here in Matthew chapter 20, verses 25. And it says, but Yeshua called them, the disciples, He called them near and said, you know that the rulers of the Gentiles are masters over them, and those who are great exercise authority over them. But it shall not be so among you. But whoever wants to become great among you, let him be your servant. And whoever wants to be first among you, let him be your servant. Even as the Son of Man did not come to be served, but to serve, and to give His life as a ransom for many. All right, so this is what it means to be great. Yeshua says the rulers of the Gentiles are masters over them, and those who are great exercise authority over them. But it shall not be so among us. If we want to be great, then we should be servants. All right. That's what makes Yeshua so great, because He didn't come to be served, but to serve and give His life as a ransom to many. Right now, what this reminds me of is, it reminds me of all the colonizers who went down as history as great people. They conquered nations and lands, and they destroyed empires, and they enslaved all these people. These people in society are considered great. They ruled over people with a hard hand. But Yeshua, Jesus says, that shall not be so among us. We don't treat people like that. If we want to be great, then we serve. And that's the difference between us and the world. See, what the world thinks is great is being big, mighty, and powerful, but that's not what greatness truly is. What greatness truly is, according to God, is those who serve. All right. Now, to reinforce that passage, I'm going to go to Matthew chapter 18. At this time, the disciples came to Yeshua saying, who then is the greatest in the kingdom of heaven? And Yeshua called a little child to Him, put him in their midst, and said, truly, I say to you, unless you turn and become as little children, you shall by no means enter into the kingdom of heaven. Whoever then humbles himself as this little child is the greatest in the kingdom of heaven. And whoever receives one little child like this in my name receives me. But whoever causes one of these little ones who believes in me to stumble, it is better for him that a millstone be hung around his neck and that he be drowned in the depth of the sea. All right. So the disciples are debating about who the greatest is in the kingdom of heaven. You know, just silly stuff, you know, kind of like we debate who the greatest in sports is today. Who the greatest in the kingdom of heaven, or that seems to be a popular argument of who the greatest is in different aspects and different industries. We're always arguing about who the greatest is. You got to keep in mind, at this time, the disciples really didn't know what was going on. They didn't know that Yeshua, the Christ, was going to die for their sins. So they're kind of arguing about over silly stuff. Who was the greatest in the kingdom of heaven? So he took this opportunity to teach them a lesson. He pulled a child to him and put the child in their midst and said, unless you turn and become like little children, you shall by no means enter into the kingdom of heaven. Whoever humbles himself as this little child is the greatest in the kingdom of heaven. So those who humble themselves are the greatest people. All right. Now, the reason that he used a child as an example is because children, they don't know anything. They're innocent. They do silly, funny things unconsciously. You know, they don't know, you know, what they're doing. You know, they're innocent beings. They still have their innocence. All right. Now, what this reminds me of is Yeshua, when he comes back, he wants us to still have our innocence. He wants our garments to be white. He wants us to not be stained by the world. This is what he's referring to. He wants us to be like children. You know, he wants us to still be humble and to not be self-conscious about what we wear and to not care about what others think. You know, in the world, the society that we grow up today, especially with social media, it's hard to maintain that innocence, because as soon as these little girls or little boys get on social media, 13, 14 years old, they lose that innocence because they're stained by the world. They're worried about what the world thinks about them. So Yeshua is saying he wants us to keep that innocence. Whoever humbles himself as this little child is the greatest in the kingdom of heaven. All right. So these are examples of what it's like to be like Yeshua, to be great, what it's like to reflect the image of Christ. All right. Now, if you go to Luke chapter 14, he gives us another example of what it means to be great and how to carry ourselves. Now, these principles and these teachings that Yeshua is teaching us in here, if you carry yourself like this is going to glorify God, because the world, they don't carry themselves like this. They don't act like this. The society we live in, there are not humble people. People don't have their innocence. All right. So in Luke chapter 14, verses 8, Yeshua says, when you are invited by anyone to a wedding feast, do not sit in the best place, lest one more distinguished than you be invited by him. And he who invited you and him come and say to you, give this one place, and then you begin with shame to take the last place. All right. So what Yeshua is saying is, when you're invited to a wedding feast or to some event, do not sit in the best place unless someone who is greater than you or more popular than you takes your spot, because the person who invited both of you may make you sit at the back because you sit at the front. You see what I'm saying? Rather, when you are invited, go and sit down in the last place, so that when he who invited you comes, he shall say to you, friend, come up higher. Then you shall have esteem in the presence of those who sit at the table with you. For everyone who is exalting himself shall be humbled, and he who is humbling himself shall be exalted. I really love this teaching by Yeshua because it teaches us what it means to be humble. All right. So what he's saying is, whenever you are invited by someone to a feast or a ceremony or some kind of event, don't try to exalt yourself by sitting at the most popular place, by sitting in front of everyone, because you may be humbled when someone that is more important than you takes your spot, right? So what you do when you're invited by someone, and this is literally speaking and metaphorically speaking, just how we should carry ourselves. He's not just talking about when you're inviting someone. This is just how you should carry yourself, period. Always sit at the lowest places. Sit at the back of the church or sit at the back of the event. Wherever you go, wherever meeting you go, you don't exalt yourself, because if you do, then you may be humbled and you're going to be looking like a fool. All right. Take the lowly seat. That's what he's saying. Whenever you go somewhere, the way you carry yourself, he's teaching us how to be humble. You sit at the back. That way, the only way to go from there is up, because you put yourself down here. So there's no way to go except from up from there, because you put yourself down there. That way, the one who invited you to the ceremony, he'll tell you to come sit at the front. And he says, when that happens, you shall have esteem in the presence of those who sit at the table with you. So what Yeshua is teaching us is that those who humble themselves will be exalted, but those who exalt themselves will be humble. And all these principles are are just things that that people notice in you if you carry yourself this way. And then in verse 12 he says, when you give a dinner or a supper, do not ask your friends, nor your brothers, nor your relatives, nor your rich neighbors, lest they also invite you back and you be repaid. So when you give a feast or something or a celebration, don't invite your family or your friends because they can pay you back. But when you give a feast, invite poor ones, crippled ones, and lame ones, and blind ones, and you shall be blessed, because they do not have to repay you, for you shall be repaid at the resurrection of the righteous. So whenever you give a feast, metaphorically speaking, and literally, whenever you give a feast, don't invite people who can pay you back. All right. Invite people who cannot pay you back. All right. Then you will receive your blessing. All right. Whenever you do things, don't expect things to be done back for you. That's what he's saying. Do things without expecting it to be done back. If you do something for someone and you expect something in return, then what you get in return is all you're going to get. All right. What you get from that person, that's what you're going to get. But whenever you do stuff and you don't expect nothing back, then God is going to be the one who repays you. All right. He's going to be the one that exalts you. And that's all I wanted to share with y'all today, man. I just wanted to show y'all what it means to be humble and what it means to be great. Whenever you carry yourself this way, man, I promise you, people can see it in you. It makes you holy, it sets you apart, and it's going to give you an opportunity to glorify God because people are going to ask you why you carry yourself that way. They're going to ask you what it is. Why do you do this? Or why don't you do that? Why do you abstain from doing this? Or why do you dress like that? Whenever you carry yourself this way, it's going to give you an opportunity to testify on behalf of God. All right. We don't have to go around knocking on people's doors and preaching the gospel and stuff like that. You'll be able to preach the gospel by the way that you live your life, and the way that you live your life is going to cause people to ask questions about why you carry yourself the way you do, and then that's going to give you the opportunity to preach the gospel. All right, so that's all I wanted to say today, y'all. We glorify God by the way that we conduct ourselves.